There's something deeply unsettling about the human mind. Not the fear of death, not the capacity for cruelty. The most unsettling thing is far quieter. It is the fact that your brain is running hidden errors right now, at this exact moment, and you genuinely cannot see them. Not because you are unintelligent, but because of one strange design flaw baked into how you think. The part of your mind that detects bias is not the same part that experiences it. Scientists call it the bias blind spot, and once you understand what it does to your decisions, your relationships, and the way you see yourself, you will never think about self-awareness the same way again. A cognitive bias is a systematic error in the way your brain processes information. Researchers have cataloged over 180 of them. There is confirmation bias, which makes you seek information that confirms what you already believe. There is the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people with limited knowledge dramatically overestimate their competence. There is the actor-observer asymmetry, where you explain your own failures through circumstances while explaining other people's through character. Most people who learn about these biases feel quiet satisfaction. They think, now I understand why people think irrationally. Now I can see through it. That satisfaction is almost entirely an illusion. And it is exactly what the bias blind spot wants you to feel. In 2002, researchers Emily Pronin, Daniel Lin, and Lee Ross gave participants detailed descriptions of cognitive biases, then asked a simple question. Compared to the average person, how susceptible are you? The answer was nearly universal. The vast majority rated themselves as significantly less biased than others. This pattern has been replicated dozens of times across cultures, age groups, and education levels. The more familiar people were with cognitive biases, the more confident they felt in their own rationality, and the less this confidence matched reality. Knowledge about bias creates the illusion of immunity from bias. This illusion feels exactly like wisdom. But this is not wisdom. It is a deeply convincing counterfeit. Here is where it gets more disturbing. When you observe someone else making a bad decision, you see their behavior and infer how they are thinking. But when you evaluate your own thinking, you do not observe yourself from the outside. You use introspection. You look inward and try to report on what your mind is doing. And introspection is not a recording. It is a construction. When you look inward to assess whether you're being biased, your brain does not give you a transparent window into its actual operations. It gives you a narrative, a plausible story about why you think what you think. And that narrative is shaped by the very same processes that produce the bias. You're trying to check for errors using the system that is making the errors. The errors become invisible because the mind that produced them is also the mind doing the checking. Psychologist Timothy Wilson spent decades studying the adaptive unconscious, the part of your mind that processes most of your experience before conscious thought begins. His conclusion was stark. Most of what drives human behavior is genuinely inaccessible to introspection, just operating below the level where language and reflection can reach. When you think you are examining your reasoning, you are mostly constructing a post hoc explanation for something that already happened at a level you never had access to. Think about the experience of a disagreement. You're in conflict with someone, a partner, a colleague, a friend. You can see clearly how their emotions are distorting their judgment. They are being defensive. They are not listening. You, on the other hand, are trying to be reasonable, and the person across from you feels exactly the same thing in reverse. Both of you are running the same introspective process, generating the same confident narrative, and both narratives cannot be simultaneously correct. The conflict is not just about the topic. It is about the fact that both of you have a blind spot for your own bias in exactly the same place. This explains something researchers have found baffling. Why does teaching people about their biases so often fail to change behavior? Education about cognitive bias has essentially zero effect on actual decision-making. People learn about the sunk cost fallacy and then walk right back into sunk cost thinking, completely unaware. Understanding a bias intellectually does not grant access to the unconscious moment when that bias is firing. The bias blind spot does not weaken with intelligence. Psychologists West, Meserve, and Stanovich tested whether more analytically gifted people were less susceptible. They were not. In some domains, greater analytical ability was associated with a slightly stronger bias blind spot. Intelligent people are better at constructing convincing narratives. The very mechanism supposed to correct bias can amplify the bias blind spot by making rationalizations more persuasive. Researchers have found a few strategies that offer genuine, if limited, help. The most consistent is called considering the opposite. Before arriving at a judgment, actively generate the strongest version of the opposite conclusion. Not a straw man, the actual strongest case. This introduces friction into conclusions formed too quickly. A related approach. Ask not whether a conclusion is correct, but what process you use to reach it. Did you seek evidence that could prove you wrong, or only evidence confirming what you already suspected? Process checking catches the error at the level where it is happening. A third approach involves externalizing your reasoning, writing down conclusions before getting feedback. When your reasoning is externalized before the outcome is known, it becomes far harder to quietly revise your process after the fact. But these are friction, not immunity. They slow down certain errors. They do not transform you into someone who has escaped a biased mind. You cannot fully see your own cognitive blind spots. By definition, that is what makes them blind spots. The moment you believe you have achieved genuine clarity about your biases, that belief is the bias blind spot speaking. The solution is not to see through the blind spot. It is to build a relationship with it, to hold your conclusions with calibrated humility, not paralysis, not endless doubt, but the recognition that your confidence in your reasoning is not the same as the accuracy of your reasoning. Every person you admire for their clarity of mind has the same blind spot. The difference between those who navigate this well and those who do not is not that some have escaped it. It is that some have built their lives around the assumption that it is always present, with external checks, genuine openness to contradiction, and one specific honesty. I might be wrong in ways I genuinely cannot see right now. Subscribe to keep going deeper. Every week, this channel goes one level further into the psychology, shaping how you think, decide, and see the world.